So when I think about perspective, for me, I think about like space. I think about how close something is to me versus like how far something is away from me. And I think that's kind of like the easiest way to consider like perspective relationships. And I think it's the process of like decision making. So if I'm looking at like a series of objects in space, right, what I'm really trying to do is decide like what objects are closest to me, what objects are farthest away from me, and how can I create that illusion of depth, right? That's really what perspective is. The other thing that we look at, which we're going to talk about, is where these lines head to and why. Like, why do they go in this direction? Why do they converge back in space? And how do I like organize shapes in relationship to like depth of field? Like if I was to omit these lines, right, all of a sudden this box is going to be in front and this box will be behind, right? But I made those decisions, okay? So it's all about the decision-making process. So in your sketchbook, let's write some stuff down, because if we write it and we read it and we hear it, it kind of sticks. So let's write perspective drawing. Our definition is a visual technique used to represent three-dimensional images on a two-dimensional picture plane. So when I think about perspective drawing, I am thinking about a visual technique, right? Not a verbal or anything else, representing how I draw or translate lines onto a surface to make something three-dimensional appear on a flat plane, right? It's really creating the illusion of space. Perspective really came into play around the Renaissance when people were trying to create scenes, right? Because all they had were paintings. There was no TVs. There was no entertainment back then besides plays and Shakespeare. And they were trying to create scenes. So the canvases became really huge, right? They moved from iconography using inverse perspective and flat spaces to like creating depth, so that when someone stood in front of a huge painting, right, what did they feel like? They feel like they're actually like part of the painting, right? So it's really about like participation. So my biggest thing is, and this is something that we all do when we're like in kindergarten, is the train track test. What is the train track test? Well, if you think about it, the train track test is the same exact thing that happens when you drive, right? It, as objects in space, right, increase in distance from the viewer, what happens to them? What's another way of saying increase in distance? As objects in space do what? Move farther away, what happens to them? Do they get bigger or smaller? They get smaller, right? So if I'm driving down the freeway on the 5 and I'm like passing the Great Park and I'm thinking about what exit I want to take, am I looking right in front of me or am I looking ahead of me? Why do you think you were looking ahead of you? What is your brain doing all the time? Yeah, it's like predetermining, right, decision-making processes. If it can see ahead of itself, right, then what it's doing is it's actually measuring the distance, and that distance is being translated into time. It's telling you how far you have to go in order to like turn left or turn right, right? All those things are kind of happening in your brain. This is actually a pretty fascinating thing when you think about babies. When babies are first born, I wouldn't say firstborn, when they're first learning how to walk, right? And gravity becomes like an issue that they're trying to compete with. The biggest thing that they have an issue with is depth perception, right? They don't know how far something is from them. So if you ever see a baby walk, or if you have like little infants around your house, watch them start to learn how to walk, not crawl, walk, right? Because they actually get up on their feet and they have their hands in front of them. Yes, they're actually trying to balance, but they're also trying to see how far things are in space. And that's how we spatially recognize things. If you've ever watched or seen somebody who has been blind, like the majority of their life, for whatever reason, and has been able to like gain sight, what do you think happens to them when they gain that sight? Let's say that if they're after 10 years old. Do you think it's just like snap and all of a sudden everything starts working? No, they've never had depth perception. The depth perception is actually through their auditory senses, right? They're hearing depth, right? We're actually always hearing depth. When they see depth, you'll notice that they can't actually understand how to walk. All of a sudden, these things that they did inherently have to be retrained because we're actually learning these things. So your brain is actually calculating these things, and what we're trying to do all the time, right? Your brain is always kind of figuring out how far things are, right? what we're actually trying to do is translate this information onto a 2D space. It's a pretty fascinating endeavor when you actually begin to think about it. So when we draw with perspective in mind, we are taking into account how an object changes, right? As we change our position to an object. And this is a really important concept. When we draw with perspective in mind, we are taking into account how an object changes as we change our position to that object. So I can imagine the building is stationary, right? But if I am sitting on the ground or if I am standing up, am I drawing that building in the same way? No, right? Because my eye line is literally changing. The distance that that building is from my position in space is actually shifting in space. So if some of you were actually drawing your still life on an easel, are you going to be looking at the same level as it would be if you were drawing from a horse? No. You know, like emotionally and physically, that you were drawing looking what? Down, if you're standing on an easel. So we know this intuitively, but how we communicate it now has to become like a conscious choice. How do I communicate that notion of looking down on something or up at something? And this is where perspective also begins to take a really important role. And this is kind of like this notion of the eye level, right? So where I am in space becomes a really important notion of the relationship of where my face is, right? Literally where my face is, where I in relationship to where I am looking at the object. This plays a really important role in figure drawing. For all of you figure drawing people, you know this. We've talked about this, right? If I'm sitting on a horse or if I'm standing in an easel, my eye level literally changes in relationship to how I see that person. So I might not see their chin, right? Or I might see the top of their head, depending on where they are in space. And those directly reflect how I begin to communicate those forms. So I'm always kind of thinking about those things in the back of my head. What is another word for eye level? Anyone know? The horizon line, correct. So those things are two completely interchangeable concepts. So anytime I say eye level, I'm also thinking about horizon line. Can anyone tell me what the horizon line is? If you look at a photo, right, you are imagining that there is a person standing right here and their eyes are right here, or their camera lens. The horizon line is where the sky and the land meet, or the horizon line is where everything comes to a little teeny weeny point and disappears. That is how you can determine where your eye is, right? So if you're ever wondering, that horizon line and that eye level are those exact same things. So the other way that I kind of think about eye level is not necessarily in space, but also in terms of an object itself. And I use my thermo flask because it's right here in front of me, right? If I take my water bottle and I hold it up straight in front of me, can I see the bottom or the top of it? No, right? I'm literally holding it like straight in front of me. But as soon as it goes up in the air, what happens to it? All right, you can see the bottom. What shape is that bottom? An ellipse, right? What shape is the top? An ellipse, not a circle. Why is it not a circle? Yeah, it's not perfectly shaped because it's not in perspective, right? So I can draw, this is kind of an interesting concept. I can draw the exact same shape. It just looks like, it's a little harder to draw in PowerPoint. It just looks like a cylinder. And if I take that cylinder and I draw an ellipse on one side, all of a sudden that cylinder gives me the illusion of looking at it from what direction? From the bottom. But if I draw that exact same shape and I draw the cylinder, the ellipse at the top, what happens? I flip that shape, right? There is this notion that I have to understand concepts of perspective in order to understand how to draw. It's not necessarily true. A lot of it's intuitive. But what I do want to understand is depending on where my eye is looking will dictate how I begin to see those shapes. So I'm always thinking about the eye level in relationship to the object itself, right? And if I'm looking at something much more dramatically from the bottom, you're going to see that the object begins to tweak, and this ellipse becomes wider and wider and wider until it becomes a what? Circle. Until I directly take that ellipse and I point it right at my face, okay? That is kind of like the overarching concept of like an eye level in general. And we're going to talk about ellipses and shapes like that, but I just want to get these concepts behind our head. All right. So the eye level and the horizon line are the axis, right? This is the most important thing around which a perspective drawing is constructed. So anytime I am drawing in perspective, I always want to place a line on my page. That line helps me to understand where my eye is, or where the viewer's eye is, right? I'm always thinking about it in reference to those two concepts. When I am outdoors, the horizon line tends to be a point of reference somewhere in space, right? Usually where I'm looking directly at. Easiest thing to kind of think about is the beach, right? Where the water and the sand meet, or where the water and the sky meet, I should say. Right, that always is where the horizon line is, because water is unabated, right? There's nothing in the way, there's no trees, there's no anything like that. In a perspective drawing, the horizon happens to be also the viewer's eye, right? Or the eye level, okay? So we're trying to keep those two concepts in mind, all right? Are you guys writing this stuff down? Should I wait? I'll wait, okay. So I'll read through this one more time. The eye level or the horizon line is the axis around which a perspective drawing is constructed. When I'm outdoors, the tendency is to kind of think about those things in terms of scale and distance, right? The horizon line at a beach is really easy to kind of keep in mind. In a perspective drawing, the horizon happens to also be the viewer's eye level. So when I'm thinking about a drawing, I'm thinking about those two concepts as being interchangeable concepts, okay? This is a Loomis drawing, and I really like this drawing because it does a really good job of kind of putting this stuff into perspective in terms of understanding what we're looking at, right? If I have my eye level in a picture, right, and ironically there's a beach scene that's drawn right here, right? You could see that as soon as the horizon line or the eye level is somewhere in the upper third of the scene, right, I actually become a part of the scene. So I am like participating, right? I'm actually like standing right here with all these people, kind of like hanging out. This is my person. This is my very fancy person. I'm gonna like draw him like my Instagram, like little drawings, right? But I'm involving myself in the actual scene. Now, if I begin to shift my eye level, right? Imagine this is my paper, but my horizon line or my eye level is way above the paper. When have we seen this eye level? Right? Any superhero movie, right? If you watch the intro to like Spider-Man or the intro to like Batman, where are they always standing? Anybody? Above the city, looking down, because they want to give you the hero experience, right? What is the hero experience? I call it the God perspective, where you are on top of the world and you are like looking down on everything. It's a very intentional choice that's being made by the directors and the cinematographers, because they're trying to place you in a perspective where you're seeing what that person in that hero position is actually understanding and comprehending, right? Now, if I look at an eye level that's sitting below the image, right, all of a sudden, the person in the scene or the object in the scene becomes the hero, and you become kind of like, I don't know, the audience, right? If you ever watch a horror movie, right, very important, you're gonna notice that this type of perspective is used all the time. The knife is always coming down and jabbing at you, right? The person's always like standing above you and opening the door and scaring the bejesus out of you. Or somebody's murdering you while you're laying down in a trunk and the trunk gets closed on your head. All these choices and perspectives are actually really important cinematography concepts that are always used. It's a really hard word. And it also is like a daily thing that we begin to think about when we think about how our position actually exists in space when we're thinking about a pictorial space. If you were thinking about art directing, or if you were thinking about becoming a layout artist, or if you're thinking about going into film, or if you're thinking about design, I cannot impress on you how important it is to understand perspective and how perspective becomes this underlying concept on thematic relationships of the audience and the viewer, right, to the concept of what's happening in the image, in the space. Did you have a question for me, Aditya?
Yeah, on the last perspective,
Mm-hmm.
could it also apply to like looking up to superior, like on the left? Like, could this also apply to like looking up to a superior person? Like
Yeah.
A person at higher
Sure.
position?
Same exact thing, yeah. All right, so I'm going to show you some old art, because who doesn't like to see old art? This is Peter Bruegel, The Elder. I'm going to have you guys tell me, where is the horizon line in this image? You can just shout it. Jasmine? Yeah, it's like right here. Boop, 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 right? All the way up there. Why does he place the horizon line all the way up there? Yeah, he's trying to show that you are like sitting actually in a physical balcony, right? Or like up in a really important building, and you are looking at all these people and all the chaos that's ensuing underneath you, because almost like you're like the king or the what would the principality or the austere person who's actually looking upon all these like sad people who are doing all these crazy things, because they're really like out of control when you really look at this image. So he's placing that perspective really importantly. Vermeer, if you've ever seen a Vermeer uses a very centered horizon line. Why does he want to use a horizon line that places you right here? Yeah, Vermeer's paintings are tiny, right? If you've ever seen them, they're like this big. Like usually like pieces of paper, right? That he spends like months and months and months on in order to create a relationship with the viewer where they're actually participating in the scene. It's a very intimate, like I would use that word, right? It's a very intimate portrait. He is forcing the viewer to like participate within the portrait. So he's keeping that horizon line right on her chest line. The same with this Gustave Caillebotte, right? He's taking the horizon line and he places it right across the eyes of these two people in space. Why do you think he does that? What does he want you to feel like you're doing? Walking in the rain, right? I'm walking in the rain. And you're walking literally the opposite direction, because he places this very strong triangle that goes right to the center of this famous building in London, okay? Hokusai's Great Wave. This is the last one we're going to talk about. Where do you think the horizon line is? Anybody? You guys have all seen this in art history at some point in time, right? I will tell you, it is like all the way down here past the image. Why is it so low? What does he want to show? Yeah, and if you've studied this extremely famous woodcut, you would know that all these little waves are little fingers, right? And what are these fingers doing? They're impeding on all these people that are going to be drowning in just a few minutes, right? They're actually trying to show the impact of that wave and the depth of that wave, right? All these little tiny people, little tiny little people, right? All the way down here are being kind of like flooded over by this huge wave that's going to come down and drown them all, right? So, and to even show perspective, what else does he do? Anyone know that there's a volcano back there? Did anybody know that? He places a volcano in the perspective just to show the mass and size, right? We talked about size relationships affecting perspective a little bit, but we're going to get into that as well, okay? So perspective, does it matter? Yes, okay? All right, so let's get into the nitty gritty. We're going to start drawing. The most important thing to learn about linear perspective, which is what we're going to be studying, is the eye level, and next to the eye level is this thing called the vanishing point. The vanishing point, this is the only sentence that I want you to memorize, is the point where things vanish. It's actually the point where lines converge, right? So we're talking about all the points in space where everything comes together and it meets at one single point in space. So we're talking about this point right here. Does anyone know how many types of perspective there are? 3. 1 point, 2 point, 3 point. Now, without having any knowledge of perspective whatsoever, what do you think the difference is between 1 point, 2 point, and 3 point perspective is? 1 point? How many vanishing points? 2 point? 3 point? You guys are geniuses. Thank you very much. In 1 point perspective, the horizontals and verticals run across the field of view and remain parallel. So if I'm talking about horizontals, horizontal go like this, verticals go like this. So if you think about tic-tac-toe, you are thinking about a 1 point perspective. Their vanishing points go to infinity. So all these lines will meet in 1 point in space, but all the horizontals and verticals will always be what? Parallel, okay? Now, this is a really confusing concept until you start drawing it in perspective. When you actually look at a perspective drawing, you'll actually see. Here's a really cheesy digital illustration of a Roman temple, and you will see that even in a digital format, all these horizontals and verticals are parallel, parallel, parallel. And the only place they meet in space is the one place where that one point actually meets in space, okay? And we will be drawing this, don't worry. I'm just gonna show you some quick examples. All right, here's another one of a simple box. You can see horizontals, right, verticals, and then that one point in space. So how many points is this? This is a 1-point perspective image, right? Why? One vanishing point, okay? So let's draw this together, right? Actually, let's talk about this first. As soon as I begin to see any lines that shift from horizontal or vertical, you're gonna notice something starts to happen in the back of your eye. You're gonna be like, something looks weird about that image, even if you don't know what it is, right? So why like this and not like this? What is the rule that's being broken? The rule of parallel lines. As soon as we break away from parallel lines in a 1-point perspective image, we begin to break the perspective of that 1 point, okay? So our goal today is to make sure that when we draw a 1-point perspective, that our lines remain parallel. So let's draw this together. I'm gonna start from scratch. I'm gonna open up PowerPoint and we're gonna do this all together. You can just grab this. Actually, this is a demo. I'll do it right here. That's fine. Let's open up another one. So when I am drawing, the first thing you want to do if you are drawing a perspective drawing is not draw vertically, right? You always want to draw horizontally. Why? Anybody know? You need a very long distance for that horizon line. So I'm gonna drop my horizon line on the lower third of the page right here. It'll go straight, whoop. And I want you to do the same thing. And we're gonna use a ruler, okay? So just make a straight line. It doesn't need to be across your whole newsprint. If you have a sketchbook, you can just do it in your sketchbook. It's easier like that. And then with a 1-point perspective drawing, how many vanishing points are we gonna have? One. So I'm gonna take my little blue pen, and I'm just gonna make a dot anywhere in space. I don't care if you put it here. It actually used to work. I don't care if you put it here. Doesn't really matter, but we're just gonna use one dot, okay? And I'm going to draw a box. Okay, now when I'm drawing my box, all right, I'm gonna do this freehand, but when I'm drawing my box, can I draw it like this? Why not? What rule does that break? My parallel rule, right? So I wanna make sure that when I'm drawing my box, I'm starting with one single line, and that line should be like perfectly straight, okay? That is going to be the beginning of everything that I do for the rest of my perspective life, right? A straight line. There are two ways to communicate this, right? I can start just by drawing my lines out if I want to, and then start communicating where I want my box to be. But for the sake of this demo, we're gonna do it the easy way, and we're just gonna start with a full box, okay? And I know a lot of you know how to do this already, but I'm just repeating just so everyone's on the same page. So I'm gonna draw my box. Boop. I'm gonna try and communicate like perfectly straight lines. I'm just eyeballing this, so it might not be perfectly straight. And then once I have that box, you guys are all drawing your boxes? Okay, I will wait. I tend to go a little fast in these perspective demos. So if I am going too fast, just say, slow down. I will be happy to slow down. Is everyone done with the box? All right, cool. So you have these things that we're gonna identify in any perspective drawing. We're gonna call these edges or corners. Those are the second most important concept in any perspective drawing. Look for your edges. What do you think I need to do? I need to take my edge and I need to connect it where? To my VP, right? I'm actually gonna label this. What does VP stand for? Vanishing point. I'm gonna label this line. What does HL stand for? Horizon line. And I'm gonna connect all my edges to my VP. And I want you to draw all the way through. Okay, so depending on how your box looks like, you know, my lines almost became parallel. That was totally an accident, not intentional. And now I want to make this box a box, right? I can't just do it randomly. I actually have to make a decision. And my decision is going to be, how wide do I want my box to be? Okay? It can be a very narrow box if I want it to be really narrow, or it can be a really wide box if I want it to be really wide. I'll make it a wide box just so we can all see it. And I'm going to come in, and from one point on that vanishing point to another point, right here to the second edge, I'm going to draw a line. Now, if I drew this line like this, if everyone wants to look up, because this is really important, this is where everyone makes mistakes, is that a one-point perspective? Why not? It's not parallel. So please make sure your lines are straight, right? That's the most important thing. Then I want to take from this corner right where I ended that line, and I'm going to draw right through. And it's automatically going to be the same width on all sides. Where this meets this line over here, I'm going to draw a line straight up. Right? Make sure it is the P word, parallel. And I'm going to come right through, and I'm going to draw another line straight across. Make sure it is parallel. Boop. I just missed that one little corner. And then we're going to use the E tool, and I'm going to erase. And I'm not going to erase 100%, but I'll erase enough that you can see how we end up with our box, right? So I'm going to erase this line right here that crosses in front, because that was actually my line from behind. All right. And this line here that crosses, I don't need it. Okay, and then if I really wanted to, I could erase these lines, and then this line right here. Oops. And now I have a box that is perfectly in perspective. All right. And I can go ahead and like erase that little back corner. All right, we can get all fancy, and I can make like shaded values, just so you guys can see this. I'm not gonna do this to every single drawing. This is one side. All right, and this is the other side. All right, and then what I did on that box is I actually created the back of that box. I'll use a lighter orange. And this is really important because it's called a hidden edge, right? The back of things that you can see. All right, it's gonna be like that back of the box. It's kind of confusing. I'm just gonna leave it the way it was. And I'll get rid of those front lines. All right, so what kind of box did we just draw? Anybody? How many points? 1 point perspective, okay? All right, so now we're gonna make it a little bit more complicated. I'm not gonna have you guys draw this. And I want you guys to actually point out where these vanishing points are. And you can just kind of like come up, well, how do we do this? I don't have like a, back in the day I used to have like a laser pointer. All right, so let's do this by hand. This vanishing point, right? If I'm going to draw it to this box number, don't give them the answers. If I'm going to draw it to box number 1, right? I want to go to the edge over here to box number 1, right? I want to draw down, these 2 points should meet, right? And where should this line go to? Back to the vanishing point, okay? Box number 2, what's the first thing I need to do? Close the edge, right? And then where should my edge go to? We only have one vanishing point, right? And where should this edge go to? One vanishing point, right? So you can see I have, one box here. This is one side. The other box here, that's the other side. So far, so good? Everyone sees what I'm doing? All right, cool. What do you think this line is for? Is it a horizon line or is it the top of box 3? Why is it not the horizon line? Thank you, Sophia. The vanishing point's over here. So the horizon line has to be on the exact same line as the vanishing point. So I know that this and this are the top of box 3. And if you see me draw it, right, it's not a straight line. I'm drawing it to the vanishing point, okay? Box number 3 has to have a top to it, so I'm going to finish that top, right? Side of box 3, I'm going to bring it down. Where is this line going to go? It has to go to the vanishing point, right? Sorry, I cannot make straight lines in PowerPoint. It doesn't allow me. So it's just going to be a little wiggly. All right, so that's the box number 3. So when I look at them, that's how it should all look like, okay? So if you look at an image like this, you should be able to problem solve what? 2 things. The first thing is you should be able to ask yourself, where is what comes before the vanishing point? Horizon line. And then by looking at all the diagonals in the scene, I should be able to determine where what is, where the vanishing point is. Those 2 concepts are extremely important. I should be able to look at anything in a building, in a space, where a person is, and determine first where my horizon line is, and second, where the vanishing point for those objects are in space. This happens all the time, all around you, everywhere you look, okay? You just don't notice it, all right? So we're gonna have a couple of more little tests because these are fun. Here, you're standing on a level dock, okay? Looking out across the water at the horizon line. Choose the most logical horizon line. If you don't know what these are little boats with little sails. It took me 3 months to figure out what those stupid little things were. But now I figured it out. Which horizon line is the one that we are looking at? What do you need to do to solve this problem? Thank you, Jasmine. You take your diagonals and see where they converge. Where do they converge? Numero dos. Yes, all right. This one is a little bit more complicated. There is no definition for it, but I remember. I'm looking at 2 doorways, right? They need to be 6 feet tall. Which doorway is the correct doorway? Does anyone know? If I come up, the middle of the doorway is right here. It is this doorway, this little one, that is the correct one. This one is like 12 feet, okay? All right. So I forget how I get the 7 feet. Oh yes, I remember now. It's like even, I calculate it. We're not gonna get into that. I don't wanna confuse you, okay? All right, 2-point perspective. What do you think is gonna change? 2 vanishing points. Do you guys need a little break or can we keep going? Let's keep going. All right, let's at least get through 2-point perspective. There are 3 sentences that you should know. The first one is, the viewer is positioned from one corner of an object in space. So now I have one corner of an object that is looking at me. 1 point perspective, right? The whole object tends to want to look at me. It's not just a corner, it's a face. This is a corner or an edge, okay? And 2 vanishing points exist on a single horizon line. So now I have a single horizon line. How many VPs? Dos. 1, 2. VP, VP. And the only verticals that remain are perpendicular, right? So only the verticals that remain are perpendicular. So if I have verticals, do they go up and down or left or right? Up and down. The verticals are my parallels. Everything else is not going to be, okay? So if I am thinking about a 2-point perspective box, I am thinking about any shapes in space that have 2 points where they recede. You're going to see with a 2-point perspective box, you're going to have these diagonals that go to 1 point in space and another point in space. And as soon as I have a 2-point perspective, right, not everything always has to follow those same vanishing points because they're all their own objects. Every object can have its own vanishing point, but the space remains the same, right? So let's draw this, shall we? You all saw what it looked like. Let's bring up a fancy pants layer. Group. I'm gonna leave my, actually I'll just draw it all over again. I didn't set it up so I could. So what's the first thing that I want to draw when I'm drawing a perspective drawing? The horizon line. Let's not draw it that big though. That's one big horizon line. All right, I'm gonna leave it on the lower third again because I want space for my drawing. Come on, straighten up. Oi. My iPad is acting up. That is a horrible perspective. Let's do that again. Who would have thought that a line would take me this long? All right, there we go. How many vanishing points do I need to have? 2. I'm just gonna put 2 random vanishing points. I wanna put them as far away from each other as possible. If they get too close together, you're gonna get distortion in your drawing, okay? And then I'm gonna move all this up a little bit. You don't have to, don't worry. But I wanna do some stuff that's gonna show you what happens when an object goes behind, okay? So let's make my boxes, let's make them purple. All right, we're gonna start with 3 lines. I want you to put 1 line somewhere up on the top. I want you to cross your horizon line, and then somewhere down below, throw me a line, okay? The lines need to be perpendicular to the horizon line. That means that they need to make like a plus sign, right? William, are you drawn? Because if you're not, you can be left behind when you do your homework. All right, what is the next step for me? Looking at these 2 problems, I have a straight line and I have vanishing points. What do I need to do with that straight line? Connect it to the what? Vanishing points. So I'm gonna take my straight lines and I'm gonna just draw lines to the vanishing point. They need to go to both vanishing points. Why? 2 point. I'm gonna come all the way over here. It's gotta go all the way across. Come all the way down. It's gotta come all the way across. It is very different to look at an image in a screen versus draw it, because now I want you to understand exactly how far your lines have to go to reach vanishing points sometimes. They have to stretch all the way across the image. And what can happen with your image when you have vanishing points going all the way across the image? Does this look clean? No. It gets very, very busy, okay? This is why when perspective drawing, I always try to use multiple colors and I always try to draw really lightly because I need to do what all the time? Erase. You can't have these lines like crisscrossing all across your image all the time because they will get very busy very quickly, okay? So in order to make these not so busy, I'm gonna make these a little lighter because I'm fancy and I have digital format and you guys don't, sorry. And now I'm gonna take these lines that I have, right? And I wanna make these into boxes, but I'm gonna wait for you guys until I see your heads and I know that everyone is like done making vanishing point lines. Are all three of these boxes in the same scene? Yes. How many horizon lines do we have? 1. Are all three of these boxes using the same vanishing points? Yes, because we've only stuck to 2 vanishing points. I haven't changed the vanishing points for any of them, okay? Are all three of these boxes in the same perspective? No, because they're changing their relationship to the horizon line or the eye line. So some are higher in perspective, some are lower in perspective, but they're using the same horizon line, so the same perspective scene, but a different relationship to that perspective. Now, how do I decide how I want these boxes to look? Random, right? I can make them really, really narrow. And really wide, or I can make it just like an ideal box. Boop. But these lines that I'm making have to be what? They have to be parallel to one another. What happens if I begin tweaking that shape? It will change from a box, right? It won't look like a box in perspective. So right now we're just keeping everything in boxes, so we want to keep those lines parallel to each other. Okay, so what am I missing on these boxes? The faces, right? I need the tops and bottoms of them. So I'm gonna go through, I'm gonna make this really big, 50% opacity, and I'm gonna start to erase, I said 50% opacity. Why are you erasing everything? These lines over here, and over here, and over here. Okay, I'm gonna leave like kind of like hints of the lines showing so everyone can see where they were. But these boxes are incomplete. So what do I need to do to complete my boxes? I need to build those faces. And this is where people kind of get confused with a 2-point perspective. If I look at this box on top, if you guys all want to look up really quick, just so you don't miss this. If I look at this corner right here, and I draw it to this vanishing point, is that going to close my box? No. So there is a rule that we have. Whatever edge I am looking at, my vanishing point always goes to the opposite side, okay? So whatever edge I am looking at, my vanishing point always wants to go to the opposite side. So if I want to draw through, I have to draw through this way, all right? My vanishing point's gonna go over here, and I have to draw through right here, okay? And you're gonna see they're gonna crisscross and make a perfect little corner. And that corner is going to make a perfect little bottom, right? Like you have a little baby with a perfect little bottom. It's a very cute little baby. All right, so I'm going to do the exact same thing to this box over here. I'm going to go from this corner to the opposite vanishing point, right? And I'm going to go from this corner. I'm going to turn it and go to the opposite vanishing point right there. And then I just want to erase those extraneous lines because we don't like those extraneous lines. That's not true. All artists are extra. I don't know what I'm saying. All right. Now, what happens to the middle box? Does it have a face that I can see? A top or a bottom, I should say. No, right? So you're going to notice that there's a rule that we're going to start to talk about. I'll let you guys kind of finish this up really quick. Pretty little 2-point boxes. When you guys are ready, let me know, and I will get into the rule. Yes, I did. It can, but if you draw through it, right? It's behind, exactly, right? We're going to talk about those lines that go behind too. All right, so here is the rule that I want you to know. Everything above the eye level, right? I am seeing from what? Below. Everything below my eye level, I am seeing from above. And when it sits right on my eye level, I'm pretty much seeing it equally, right? Equidistantly. So if I can remember these two concepts, I can begin to look at objects in space, right? And just automatically perceive where it exists in relationship to me. If I can see underneath it, I know it's above my eye level. If I can see below it, if I can see underneath it, if I can see above it, it's beneath me. Let me repeat that one more time. If I can see below the object, it is above my eye level. If I can see on top or above the object, it is below my eye level. So it's always the inverse relationship. Okay? Does that make sense to everyone? All right. So we'll do one last thing, and then we'll take a little break. And this is probably one of the most important things for your homework. If I draw through my box, right, or any shape that I'm drawing, and I begin to find those back corners, right, I'm actually finding something that we call invisible edges. And those edges allow me to perceive objects in a three-dimensional space, even within the context of where they exist outside of what I can actually see. So you can determine where something actually is based on those vanishing points, and it's very accurate, right, to a T. And this plays a really, really important role when we begin to think about how we build things like houses and things like that, or structures that have a lot of depth to them, okay? So for your homework, you're going to need to perceive these hidden edges, because a lot of times you're going to need to find where things are behind the objects in space, okay? Does that make sense to everyone? All right. So three-point perspective is something that actually happens all the time, but we don't really notice it. If you are ever looking at a skyscraper, it is usually in three-point perspective. If you're ever in an airplane, you're looking at something in three-point perspective. If you're ever really high or really low, usually things are happening in three-point perspective to some extent. But when we draw, we try to avoid three-point perspective because it makes things very complicated. But we're going to go through some demos anyway. So in three-point perspective, our sentence or our definition is: the viewer is positioned from one corner of an object in space, as well as above or below that same object. So if you imagine ever like going to Washington, D.C. and looking at the Washington Monument, you know, it's like that really long, like weird looking, like temple obelisk thingy that kind of like does this. That's like a perfect example of three-point perspective, because it is so tall, you are seeing the corner or the edge of the object. You are also like all the way like little person down here way below. Hello, hello, this is me, take a picture. All right, Instagram, hello moment. and then it is really, really high, right? So it is a 3-point perspective object. So with 3-point perspective, what do you think changes? 3 VPs. That's what we need in our life, 3 VPs. The third vanishing point extends either upward or downward in space off of the Mr. or Mrs. horizon line, okay? So big concepts to look at. All this is gibberish until we look at examples because most of us are visual thinkers. So let's look at an example, shall we? All right. So I'm standing in front of Mr. Skyscraper or Mrs. Skyscraper. The horizon line is running right down the middle. My little person is like right here. Hello! All right. He's waving. Yes, I draw for a living. Don't be jealous. Oh, yeah. I've come a long way, baby. All right, so this is the center of my building. You're going to notice your vanishing points in the 3-point perspective go all the way off the page, usually. Like, they're like all the way over here. And then that third vanishing point is all the way over here. So it's 1, 2, and then 3 is going to be all the way at the top, okay? So you'll notice what happens to the object with a 3-point perspective. It begins to do what? Taper. It goes like this or like this. That is the big difference. Instead of it being perfectly perpendicular, right, like that box we just drew, what happens to these edges? They start to pinch. And depending on how like oblique it is, it will pinch more or less, right? But that over there is VP3, okay? Does that make sense? So what if the vanishing point's underneath? What's going to happen to that shape? Can you tell me? Yeah, it's going to flip. It's going to go the opposite direction. It's going to look like this. All right. Where's the vanishing point now? All the way down here. Does that make sense? Pretty easy to see visually when somebody draws it for you. When you're looking in real life and you're trying to identify the tapering of a big building, because it always happens with big things, it's really hard to see a 3-point perspective with a very small object like a pencil. Why? Why is it going to be really hard? I guarantee you this is in 3-point perspective, but why is it going to be hard for the human eye to see? Because it's so small and so close to me. The distance of the object actually will determine that third point. So the farther it gets away from me, right, and the more acute it gets, the bigger it gets, the easier it is for me to see those angles in space, that third point, okay? So rarely are you ever going to draw a pencil in 3-point perspective. It's kind of like redundant almost, okay? All right, so that's kind of what we just covered right here, right? Kind of the things that I drew. Skyscraper can be at street level, and once it's at street level, that actual horizon line can actually become flat. If it's far enough, it will actually look like it's flat on both top and bottom. So the farther away it is, the flatter it will get, right? The closer it is to me, the more acute it will get. Not cute like in, ooh, Hello Kitty, right? Acute like in angles, right? Everyone understand? Cool. So let's have some fun and let's draw some vanishing points together. This one is a hard one. There are 10 vanishing points in this scene. I am not going to do them. I'm going to have you guys do them. So I'm going to just call random people up here and you're going to come onto my iPad and you're going to draw me a vanishing point. Amy, you want to start? Martina, you're going to come next? Aditya, you're going to come next? Who wants to go next? Just line up because I'm not doing this. You guys are going to do this. And you're going to tell each other whether you're right or wrong. Janet, you can come up. Tiara, you want to come up? Just line up, people. Come on. You're going to do this for each other.
Do I just start anywhere?
Anywhere.
Okay.
Come on, everybody. Don't be shy.
Do I just do...
Just one. I will tell you there's 20-something vanishing points there. Everyone can just come up. Come on up. There's not even 20 people in class. Good. Janet is correct.
Oh my gosh.
Martina whether she's correct. Where are you drawing? Is that right?
No.
No. Why? There's a little undo button right there.
Oh, okay.
Actually, no, this is Photoshop. I want you to like draw it straight out. Try to make it as straight as you possibly can.
Straight?
Well, I mean, kind of straight. That's a horrible one.
I know.
Does everyone see why I'm correcting her?
Oh my gosh.
Where should that vanishing point go?
Like towards.
It's gonna pass the skyscraper even. There you go. All right, that's good. All right, next. Good. Next. Corey, why don't you come up? Don't be shy. All of you guys, come up. There's a bunch.
Is that fine?
Where'd you draw? Yes,
This
that is right. You were good. You are all touching the blessed iPad of Joe Gertis, just so you know. Yes, that is good. Correct, Jasmine. Where are you drawing? See, everyone's afraid of the house down there, huh? No one wants to draw the house. Good.
Is that good?
Yes, but where does it go?
For like beyond the page?
So zoom out and show me where it goes. It's not
Like-
when you zoom out all the way, but you can kind of draw it.
Ah!
You just deleted everyone's work.
No,
it's totally okay. It doesn't matter. I have all the
You
answers.
told me to zoom
I know it's my
out.
fault. Ah, don't cheat. Okay, it's like right here. You were right. We'll just leave it at that. God,
I'm
ruining
sorry,
all
I'm
my
sorry.
stuff, Sophia. I know. I'm kidding. It's my fault. Good. All right. Where's the other one? Is that the right one?
I don't
What did you
think
guys
so.
say?
Oh, I feel
Is
like
the
it's too
roof
up.
and the base of the house at the same vanishing point? No.
Well, what?
There you go.
I'll just leave it.
It's okay, you can leave it there, we'll fix it later. Alright, you're the last person, everyone else is chicken. You guys are all scared? You just want to see the answers. Is this what the world has come to? COVID laziness? Is that what it is? Everyone, this is like laying in the bed
go
while
back.
teachers are lecturing like me. You guys would be like this. Huh? What?
I'll do this one.
You're actually right, you're good. Alright, so this is what I have. And just to finish that last one that was being drawn, boop, right there, okay? So I have 12, there's more than 12, but you can see where they all go to. This one right here, no one drew, right? These of the rooftop, no one drew, right? These are pretty easy. The rooftop actually has a back to it, actually a 6, right? These are 4, 5, so there's a whole bunch, okay? What I want you to be able to do is look at an image like this and to start identifying where those vanishing points go, or in real life, okay? That is kind of my goal. Does the horizon line change with a 3-point perspective? No, the scene is still the same, right? This line right here will not change. What is changing? What is changing? The Kamala Andersons, right? The VPs, yes, the vanishing points, all right? All right, so common errors in perspective. These are things that I see people do wrong. When the VPs get too close together, right, things will distort. All parallel planes must always vanish to the same point. So if you see a plane that is tilted, it is wrong, right? With a single point perspective, this is like pretty oblique, but you're not going to see usually too much of a side plane. What Loomis is saying is it will be much more narrow, which is true. So you just don't want things to come too close. Watch distortion. You can see this is very subtle, but this line is coming straight out. This line is straight, this line is straight. So watch distortion, right? And then a bunch of other stuff, so. Okay. Next thing I want you to do is be able to measure in perspective. And this is very hard. This is where things come into play, where I want you to not use a ruler and to understand how to like identify things. Like if you have a fence line around your house, or if you have windows on a building, This is how we begin to think about those forms. It's called this concept of the perspective center, right? And this is when we're trying to locate the center of a surface, but the surface is not looking straight at us. That is why it is called the perspective center, right? So when the center of an object is actually shifted in space, we go into this world of diagonals. That means that we start to look at two planes. We identify where those two planes are. I'm going to draw diagonal lines that go across those planes. I'm going to draw this fictional center line. And then I'm going to draw diagonal lines that go right through those next two planes. And then what that helps me to do is it helps me to create equal spacing of these bars that begin to kind of like transition in space and create this wonderful world of exact equidistant spatial relationships of fences or anything else we need to measure, okay? So we're gonna do this together, all right? And we're gonna draw this step by step, and I'm just gonna use this like a little handout so you guys can all see what the next step is. First thing I wanna do is draw my eye line or my horizon line and label it. You can call it EL, you can call it HL, and then I want you to make a VP over here, and we're gonna draw this thing exactly like it's drawn here. I want you to draw two poles, one pole, two pole, about an inch apart on your page, okay? So step one, horizon line. Step two, vanishing point is way out here. Step three, just draw me two poles. And I will read through this while you guys are doing that. First, establish the eye level, then draw the first pole. Draw guidelines from the top and bottom of the pole to a vanishing point on the eye level. Then draw a second pole. I cheated a little bit. I was like, just draw two poles. Okay. Now, when I draw two poles and I draw a vanishing point that goes from the top and the bottom of the pole all the way across, if my second pole isn't the right size, what's my vanishing point going to tell me? The vanishing points are going to tell me where to erase. They're going to tell me, hey, that pole is too long. It's not sitting on the same construction line as the other pole, right? So anytime anything is moving in space, they have to have the same baseline and the same top line because they are the same object. So if it's a fence, the fence isn't going to be all erratic unless you want to intentionally draw it erratically. So when we draw those vanishing points all the way through, they kind of help to line up that shape as it goes towards the horizon line and moves into a diminished point in space, right? Next step, you want to cross those diagonals. So I'm going to crisscross from one diagonal to the other, to one corner. I'm going to draw from the other top to the other corner, and then I'm going to make an X. Okay, that X is giving me this notion or this idea of the perspective center. Does that make sense to everyone? So, cross the diagonals to find the perspective center of the four-sided shape you formed and draw a line from that point to the vanishing point. So now I'm going to take this line right here and I'm going to draw right down the middle, and that's going to be my perspective center. Everyone get that? Okay. Now I'm going to take a line and go straight from here. I'm drawing right from here. And I'm going to go beep, 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 beep. And I'm going to cross this first line right here. you got to make sure that it crosses right where this line right here crosses this line right here. And then I'm going to make another pole. Okay. I'm going to go back to the top of that second pole now, and I'm going to draw another diagonal, cross that perspective center, come down. I'm going to draw another pole. And then I'm going to go back one, cross the center, draw another pole. I'm going to come back one, cross the center, draw another pole, come back one, cross the center, draw another pole, come back one, cross the center, draw another pole. And these poles, if I was to take out a ruler and walk through space and somehow be able to make an imaginary distance and turn these into like 3D models, would be exactly equidistantly placed. So I'm going to show you the much cleaner version, right? I'm going to go, as soon as I draw through this perspective center, right? This is my first pole. This is second pole. I'm going to go back to the first pole. Here was that original X, right? Which gives me that perspective center. I'm going to go back to this first pole, draw right through the second pole now, will give me that third pole. I'm going to go back to the second pole, draw right through the third pole, it'll give me a pole. I'm going to go back to the third pole, draw right through the fourth pole, it'll give me a pole, and so on. Does everyone see how I did that? Is anyone confused by this? You are going to be using this a lot on your homework because this is how you're going to measure things. Okay, you can always come back to the video too and rewatch it. You can always look at the PDF because the PDF also shows it on Canvas, but all this stuff is there. But I do want you to be able to now measure the distance between things in perspective, okay? So the first question then becomes, well, Joe, how do I determine how far apart these are? Technically, I would tell you to pull out a ruler and do all this other stuff, but because this is a drawing class, what do you think my answer is going to be? Eyeball it, right? You just kind of look in space and you kind of say, okay, well, the building, the windows right here, it has 4 windows, so I'm going to measure just that first space between those first windows. And then I can figure out where the other 4 windows are, okay? Or I can figure out the width of those windows, and then I can break those windows in half and then divide them. There's all sorts of ways to kind of go about doing that, okay? And I will show you guys, we're still going to draw a whole bunch more. Does anyone have any questions about the perspective center? You should, because now we're going to start drawing things with the perspective center, like a house. Are you ready to draw a house with me? Yay! Are you ready to draw a house with me? Yay! Yay, okay. So exciting. Let's build a house. All right. Let's draw a house. So we're going to give ourselves a couple of rules for this house. Rule number 1, the house has to have at least 2 sides showing. So how many points in perspective is it going to have? 2. Rule number 2, it's got to have at least 3 windows, 2 on one side, 1 on the other. Right? Rule number 3, I want a door. Rule number 4, it has to have a roof. Rule number 5, I want to build a chimney on top so that I don't die and suffocate when I turn on the chimney, when I turn on the fireplace, okay? All right, with these rules in mind, what do we do when we want to start drawing? First thing we want to do is draw an eye line. So we're going to draw this from scratch. Are you ready? Yeah! The excitement, I feel it. It's tactile. Where should my horizon line be on this drawing? Do I want my house floating up in space? So where should my horizon line be? Yeah, on the bottom. I'm going to put it right here. Why does my lines just do not want to be straightsies? Come on. There we go. Do what I say. All right. I always leave the horizon line, and the on its own layer because I don't want to mess with it. Okay. How many vanishing points do we want? 2. So I will tell you that if you were drawing a house, those vanishing points need to be as far away from each other as possible because they don't like each other. It's like the house is already divorcing itself. So we're going to put one over here, one over here. I'm such a good influence. And we're going to put the EL over here, right? So VP, VP, EL. And now let's start by building our house. Let's make the house green. So if I want to draw a house, the first thing that I want to draw is the edge of a house because that is how I start a box. So I don't want to start with the face of a house, right? I just want to start with the corner. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to draw. There's a lot of noises. I'm going to draw a corner right here. And it's going to be a little closer to one vanishing point than to the other, not right smack in the middle because I don't want my house to be just kind of like flat. And you can make it kind of close to the bottom so it doesn't float off of the hill too much. All right. So the first thing that I want to do when I'm drawing my house is draw my box. So I'm going to draw one line to one vanishing point. And then I'm going to connect my house, come on, to the other vanishing point. Hello, Mr. Vanishing Point. There you are, you so fancy. I see you. There's my other vanishing point. Okay. And I have made a 2-sided box. Now, if I am homeless, I am done because all I need is a box. But we need more than a box because we have homes with roofs over our heads. And when we start drawing roofs, things get complicated, people. Things get very complicated. So the first thing I want to do is just draw the face of my roof, of my house. So is this right? Why not, Sophia? Yes, because I am not supposed to draw anything diagonally. So I'm just going to make my house a little bit fat in the front. I like a house that's thick, all right? And then we're going to make it a little bit wider in the back. It's like a mansion. Oh, my goodness. I'm rich. And then, I entertain myself. I don't care about you people, all right? I'm going to make it a little bit taller because it's a little short. I don't want a stumpy house. So I'm just extending out my lines and following my vanishing point. You can do the same thing if you want. It's totally up to you. All right, and then I'm gonna erase my vanishing point lines. I don't need them. I don't need you. I can do this myself. My house is a teenager. It's got some attitude. All right. The jokes are just coming like on fire today. All right. So I need to find out where my door is going to be. How do I do that? Hint, hint, hint. What did we just work on? Perspective center. I'm going to make an X because X's are pretty. So let's make an X. Oh, that's a pretty X. And let's draw a line straight from that X up. All right. And I'm going to use that for 2 things. I'm going to use that for my door. And what else do you think I'm going to use that for? My roof. My roof. My roof is on fire. These people outside are annoying as heck.
Hey, you, shut up.
All right. I want to do the side of my house, but I will do that after I build the roof. So let's do the roof first. I don't know if my lines are perfectly straight. They look a little tilted. Yeah. See, I too am not perfect. I'd like to believe I am, but the truth is I'm far from it. I think that is a better line, yes. Now, that screws up everything. So we have to go in and clear this layer. And I gotta do this all over again. So yeah, just because you have one line that you need to correct, unfortunately, that will ruin every single line you have drawn, and you have to redraw every single one of them. There we go. That is straight. All right, so I'm gonna make a little triangle. I'm gonna go from one corner over here. I'm gonna go from the other corner right there. I'm gonna let it overlap a little bit, and that is how you make a triangle. Now, if I was really anal, I would measure the roof and figure out exactly how high it should be, or I could compare it to the side of my house. But right now, we're just trying to get these principles down, so I'm not gonna be too detail-oriented, okay? Now I'm gonna take my rooftop, and I'm gonna draw this corner somewhere. Where does this corner have to go? Does it go to this left-hand side, or this right-hand side vanishing point? Which one, left or right? Left, correct. So let's draw that line over here, and it's gonna go to that VP, okay? And then I'm gonna show you a visual perspective tool. If I'm trying to match the angle of my roof, I can choose to determine where the third point in perspective is going to be, or the thing that I do because I'm an artiste is I match the angle of my roof. So I want to basically draw a line that looks similar to this line and then bring it over right there, okay? So, which is what I already did. It's kind of like that line. But I will do it one more time for you guys. So I'm gonna match the angle of my roof, and it's gonna be pretty steep. So I don't need to worry about the vanishing point as long as my angle looks what? Similar. Okay, you can deceive the eye, especially on diagonals. All right, now I want to draw a door and a window and two other windows, right? Because that was our rule. Correctamundo? Okay, so let's do that. Let's draw. What time is it? Anyone know what time it is? My kids have my phone. 10:39. All right, we got about an hour. So I'm gonna come in and I'm gonna draw my X over here on this side. You notice I'm leaving all my X's. I'm not getting rid of them right now. That's funny. So many ways. I'm leaving the drawn X's on my image. I'm not gonna get rid of them right now. And I'm gonna draw right through the center of those X's into the vanishing point, okay? So when I first draw a perspective drawing, do you think there are a lot of lines on my drawings? Yes. I actually usually use 2 layers when I'm drawing, so I can have one that's just vanishing point lines, and the other one is my final black line sitting on top. Hint, hint, hint for your homework, right? We're always gonna have multiple lines and multiple layers when you're actually drawing in perspective. So I want this to be like a door that's about 7 feet. I would assume my house is about maybe like 15-foot facade, so my door is gonna be a little bit higher than halfway. So I can make a line that just kind of like sits right here. And I want it to be in perspective. So is that in perspective? No. Is that in perspective? Yes. How do I know without looking at the vanishing point? I look at the diagonals. If it's following those lines, then I am drawing correctly, right? And then I'm gonna draw the side of the door. Side of the door, should it be angled or straight? It needs to be straight, all right? I'm gonna come right here to this corner and straighten out my door. And now I have a door that is actually in perspective. If I wanna draw it a little bit more accurately. and it is at the exact center of my house. And you'll notice it's not the same width from left to right, because as things go farther away from me, what happens to them? They get narrow, right? They will slowly diminish in space, in perspective. So I don't have to question this door. I know it is perfect, right? Because it is in perspective, not because Joseph Kirkus drew it, right? I'm going to draw a window, and I'm just going to eyeball this window. I'm going to make it a line right here, and I'm going to come down and draw a square. Oops. Okay. So make sure your lines are always moving in the same angle of the vanishing point, right? So if my line's doing this, not correct. If my line's coming down too far, not correct. It's got to go all the way to this vanishing point over here. All right, so I have my door and my window is very beautiful window. I am very amazingly talented. I have designed a square. Don't be jealous. My square is better than your square. All right, and then how many windows did we have on this side of the house? Dos. Now I'm going to give you a little mathematical equation. I want two windows that are equally spaced. What do I have to do? I have to find the center. And then what do I got to do with the center? I have to determine where I want that first window to be, which I cannot do without finding the center. And look at how many crisscrosses I'm going to start making. 1 crisscross, 2 crisscross. Gets very busy, correct? All right, but now I know where one center is going to be, and now I know where the other center is going to be. Okay? But I don't want to draw these windows in the same color, because if I do, you guys aren't going to see anything. It's going to be way too busy. Did everyone see how I found the center of the windows? First, I split the house in half, imagining that those windows are evenly spaced, and then I just found the center of where I want those windows to be. Now I want to find out how wide I want those windows to be. I'm going to just determine them randomly. I'm going to start from the vanishing point way over here, and I'm going to say, hey, I want the top of this window to be right here. And if I stay to my vanishing point, I will be following my rule. And I'm going to find the bottom of my vanishing point way over here. Okay. And now I have the tops and bottoms of my window. I have all these lines here, so I can actually use these lines. Where this line crosses right here, I already have those lines. I'm going to make that one side. I'm going to make this the other side. All right, I'm going to do the exact same thing right here. This line crosses right there. This line crosses right there. So those are measurement lines. I'm just going to keep them the same. And I have my windows, and they are 100% the same size, 100% on the center of the house in those two squares, and they are equally placed. And now I have a center line for those windows, so if I wanted to draw like, what are those things called? Little flaps on the windows, I forgot, I'm blanking out. Shutters, thank you. Now I can draw those as well, okay? Did everyone see how I did that? Did I go too fast? Sometimes I go fast. So in order to find the determined space, right, I just went all the way to the vanishing point. Because I already had all these crisscross marks, these crisscross marks are actually measurements. So where they touched, right, these lines, I just drew a line, and they're going to do the exact same thing on the opposing side where they touch right here. They're going to make measurement lines, and that's how I determined how wide I want it to be. Okay? Now I want to draw, what was the last thing we wanted to draw in the house? A chimney. Oh, chimney. Hello, chimney. All right. In order to draw a chimney, what do we need to start with? The bottom of the chimney. Otherwise, we don't know where it goes. Martina, are you lost?
No.
Okay. If you are, let me know and I can come and help you. Okay. To draw the bottom of the chimney, we make another layer. And we call this layer nothing. And we start with a line. I'm going to go to this vanishing point all the way over here. Why am I going to this vanishing point and not to the other one? This side of the house is going to which vanishing point? The right one. Right? This side of the house is going to which vanishing point? The left one. My left, your right, probably, right? Is it your right? Yes, all your rights. Okay? So I'm always trying to stay consistent with my vanishing points. So if you ever get lost, just remember, follow your vanishing point. And I want my chimney to kind of like start halfway up my roof, so I drew my vanishing point so it's kind of like halfway up the roof, right there. And then we can sing the roof song. The roof is on fire. All right? And we're going to just draw straight lines. Why do I want to draw straight lines? Because it's a 2-point perspective, right? So it shouldn't be doing this. All right, I can kind of compare it to my windows, make sure they're straight, or I could use my ruler because that's what I should be doing, but I have no ruler because I'm working on an iPad. And I'm going to say that is my chimney. Now, if I want to be ridiculous, I can make my chimney like 2 times the size of the house, which would be kind of funny. We could, but let's not. I'm going to move this on top of my blue line so you guys can see it. Now I have to make the top of my chimney. I'm going to come to this corner right here, and where do I want to draw to? My vanishing point. So what I have drawn is a rectangle in perspective on the same side of the house. Okay? Now, that is one flat chimney. What is missing? What is missing on my chimney? The other side of the chimney. A chimney tends to go all the way over the roof and cross over. So I'm going to take this corner, and where does this line have to go? Does it go this way? It's going to repeat. Where does it have to go? To the opposite vanishing point. So I'm just going to go all the way down here, boop, and it's going to go to that vanishing point right there. Okay? But I'm going to erase this line because I don't want it to be on top of everything right now. I'll leave it hanging. And now what has to happen with the back of my chimney? Does the line go diagonal? It could be like a funky little like hook chimney, right? But for the sake of the demo, we'll leave it straight. Okay. Now if I want to draw like a really cutesy little rooftop, I can kind of like be like, oh, let's make a little top of the chimney. Oh, so cute. Let's make a little box that goes on top of the chimney too. Oh, so cute. All right, you can do all sorts of things as long as you do what? Follow the perspective, okay? If I want to make bricks, oh, I can make bricks too. See how good I can draw? Look at that, I can make lines. Don't be jealous of my bricks. But why do those look like bricks? Because they're following the P word. What's the P word? Perspective. Now, if I made my bricks wrong, what would make them look wrong? If I took my lines and then did this. Are these bricks? No, that's jibber jabber. And jibber jabber does not belong in perspective because we have to follow rules. All right? Jibber jabber is no rules. Why is it jibber jabber? Because it's not following the what? The vanishing points, right? The perspective. Okay? Now, this is not done yet. Why not? Because it's not on the rooftop, Joe. Correct. We need to make it on the rooftop. So imagine it is following the roof, and then it actually has to connect to the roof. Now, here's the trick question. This is one where you actually have to problem solve. How do I determine this angle? I told you guys a little earlier. What does it have to follow? Yes, correct. As long as it follows the angle of the roof, it will be in perspective and will look like it is sitting on the house. This first diagonal determines everything. Okay? And now you have a roof. Now you have a chimney. Oops. And windows and all sorts of beautiful things. and you can celebrate because you've graduated and you can afford a $2.7 million house in California that is really just a box with a chimney and 2 windows, because that's how much houses are now. All right? Does anyone have any questions about this? Does everyone see how all these principles start coming together to make drawings? Okay? Even though I make fun, this is actually really important stuff, and I do want you guys to like understand it. So this is what we did, step by step. Okay? And if you ever want to go back to the PDF, it is in Canvas. You can redraw this and draw it step by step. It does show you one other thing, and it shows you how to create depth. And this is really important. So I'm going to show you how to build depth onto your chimney so you can actually build depth onto your drawing in general. Okay? Because we don't want our drawings to just look flat. We want them to actually feel like they have some real physical, spatial relationships to them. And the way that I want to do that is first go up to the top of my roof. And I'm going to extend out this line. Why is my line so thick? Moved. I'm going to extend out this line, right? I'm going to make it go in the same perspective, just a little bit. And I'm going to draw it down, and I'm going to have it follow that perspective, and I'm going to make an eave. Now, here's the trick question. The bottom of the eave, what vanishing point does it have to go to? Does it go to this one? Nope. Opposite, remember? So it's got to go all the way over here. So I want to make sure that that line that I'm drawing is in the same perspective. Okay? All right. What else do I want to draw? So now I want to find the opposite side of my roof. So I'm going to come to this corner right here. If I'm going too fast, just let me know. And I'm going to draw it to this line right there. And that's going to meet my roof. And it's going to tell me how long my roof should be. And I'm going to take this line, and I'm going to go back to this vanishing point. And now I have the bottom of my roof with a little eave that is actually very accurate in space and tells me the exact length of my roof. Does everyone see how I made that measurement? Martina, you good? Okay. If you're not, let me know. Happy to do it again.
Question. For our assignment, so you said we're gonna do the lines, right?
I'm going to show you actually how to prep your homework. It's after all this. We still have more to go. What time is it? Can anyone tell me? Do I have time? Okay. You said 11. What was it?
10:54.
Oh, 10:54. Okay, cool. So we still got 45 minutes. All right. So I'm going to group all this. Do you guys want me to save out these drawings in Canvas? Okay. I will do that. Okay, so let's go back to our PowerPoint. Last but not least, ellipses in perspective. Because if you cannot draw an ellipse, you might as well just quit. I'm just kidding, don't quit. Ellipses in perspective are actually a really important tool because you need to be able to draw circles, right? Or curves or anything like that in perspective. We always use basic perspective parallelograms, and you can place anything on a basic parallelogram by using the crisscross method and corners. So you start with a square, right, like this. You make your perspective center like this. You find your center, and then we just basically draw like little half circles that travel around these shapes and corner the shapes equally across all 4 quadrants. That is how you make a super duper accurate ellipse. Like if you need one, like for your rollerblades or something, because you're drawing like a car or something like that. That's how you do it. Don't worry, we're gonna do this together. We talked about the importance of the eye level, but let's draw some ellipses together. Do you guys want to come up and do these, or you want me to just do these for you because you're all tired? Anybody want to draw ellipses? All right, so let's draw these together. All right, so if I have a parallelogram, I can imagine that I have a center line that's doing this and a center line that's doing this. I'm going to just kind of go connect the quadrants. Boop. It needs to flatten out a little bit. Boop. All right, so that's going to be one ellipse. All right, another ellipse. I'm not going to draw all these. I just kind of want to show you. It's got to kind of like, I think that the way that I had a teacher at Art Center say, it's got to kind of like kiss the edge. It kind of like makes a curve that kind of flattens, kisses the edge, and then kind of comes up and around. So you always want to like pretend you're giving your ellipse a little kiss right here, right here, right here, and right here. That is where the kisses happen. And then we just kind of like connect the edges of those shapes. Okay? And eventually you won't even have to do this with a parallelogram. You can kind of do it like without it whatsoever. But this is kind of what they will look like. Okay? Some examples of ones that I drew in. Alrighty. So if you ever want to figure out the shape like of a lamp, draw a rectangle at the top of the lamp. And then from that rectangle, you can kind of determine, like, and you keep the rectangle the same width, and you can kind of determine like what the shape is going to be, okay? Or if you have like something that is cylindrical. So I've shown my figure drawing students this before. This is an older demo. But really, we use perspective all the time in figure drawing. Like if we're breaking down a hand, we think about like simple shapes that we can use to kind of like adapt those shapes to like really complex forms. Because if something is coming towards you or away from you, we always use the word foreshortening, but foreshortening is another way of saying what? It's in what? Perspective, right? If I'm drawing a character for Comedy Central because they need like a funky fat dude who's going to jail, right? I need to be able to send this character to Korea. I need to be able to take that character and translate it in perspective because that's how they're going to make the turnarounds that bring my characters to life. So these principles happen all the time, right? If I'm drawing a figure that is actually looking at me and it's in foreshortened view, if I can draw it in basic shapes using cylinders and ellipses, all of a sudden those shapes will help me to translate that form into accurate perspective, okay? So these things have so many, perspective has so many different uses that kind of overlay into what we're going to be doing throughout our creative careers, okay? So your homework is going to kind of entail you to take a picture and to draw that picture, and I want you to actually photograph your own scene, okay? So when I'm looking at a scene, the very first thing that I want to do is ask myself, where is the horizon line and where are the vanishing points in the scene? This one's pretty easy, right? If I step back, I can see that my vanishing points are all going up in space. This is a very dramatic image, right? This vanishing point is way over here. This vanishing point is way down here. My horizon line is so far beneath me, it is probably like, I'd need like 2 pages just to connect where that horizon line is going to be, okay? So first thing I want to be able to do is to be able to identify where the horizon line in the image is. So where is the horizon line in this image? The bottom. Where in the bottom? Yep. Good call. Right there. Where are the vanishing points? What do you need to do? I would follow the first building, the peak of it, to see if you can find it. Now, are all these buildings facing the same way? No, they're all turned. So one is going to have a vanishing point that goes off like this. Another one's going to have a vanishing point that comes down a little lower. But they're all going to be in different views, right? And that third point in perspective is going to be following a very specific grid, okay? We're going to do another one. This is an interior of a hotel. All right. Where is my horizon line? What do I need to do to find my horizon line? Follow your what? Your diagonals. Where are your diagonals going to lead? Right to where your horizon line is, okay? In an interior space, it's very easy. Follow anything that's going away from you in a straight line, okay? And not a straight line, in a diagonal line, but straight diagonal line, okay? And then you could start seeing, okay, well, that's my horizon line. All these chairs are turned in different positions. They're not going to have the same vanishing points because they're not like all the same box like we were drawing. They're all going to have their own vanishing points. So I got to figure out where the vanishing points are. All I do is follow the diagonals. Here's the cushion. I'm going to go to it and be like, okay, there's the vanishing point for this dude right here. Now I got to figure out the second vanishing point. It's going to be over here. So this one's rules are going to be VP1. And VP2 is going to be somewhere over there, right? If I want to start with like just a simple ottoman, right? I'm going to find where this vanishing point is right here. And this vanishing point is going to go way off to the side, like way over there. And I know that that's going to be my two vanishing points. This is going to be one vanishing point and two vanishing points going to be like way over there, okay? Every object in that space is shifting into a different position, except for what? Are the doors and pictures going to have different vanishing points? No, why? Because they're against the wall. Any of these objects that are against the wall, are they going to have different vanishing points? No, because they're all against the wall. It's only when the edge of an object changes in space. Does everyone understand that? When something begins to rotate, all of a sudden it has its own identifying vanishing point. Does the horizon line change? No. Why? Has the space changed? Same space. How many horizon lines can you have? Just one. Why? Because you got one pair of eyes, right? And they're not going to move anywhere else. Okay? Now, if I'm doing a 3D image, totally different concept. It'll have like multiple horizon lines and vanishing points because I got to move through it, but that's all a different story. Okay? Let's say I am working for DreamWorks and I am building a background layout painting because I want to do paintings for a living because I love this kind of stuff. Do I need to know perspective? Yes. Why? Because it affects color too. But what else does it affect? It affects how I lay out these really complex scenes. And I will tell you, looking at something like this, most people who've never done perspective before want to shoot themselves in the head. But it's actually really easy. What we start with is a grid. And this is how I want you to start your homework. You first look at what you are looking at, right? Determine where your eye level is, right? This should be the first line on the paper. Usually I will find even the center of my image. Like maybe I want that to be my image center. Then in a 1-point perspective grid, right? This is a 1-point perspective grid. So if I have a 1-point scene, how many points am I going to have in space? 1, right? Because how many points is the perspective? 1. I can just draw my point in space, and I'm going to fan out a whole crap ton of lines in one direction so that I don't have to worry about my perspective. If I have all these lines underneath me, then all I have to do is draw. And I can just draw with all these lines acting as my guide in perspective. So literally, I will lay this under a digital painting. If I'm doing like a 1-point digital painting, and if I have this underneath, then when I'm drawing a line that is moving to my vanishing point or painting a line, all I have to make sure is that my paint stroke is kind of, sort of, heading into the direction of the vanishing point. Does that make sense? Okay, 1-point perspective, really easy. And all I know with the 1-point perspective rule is that anytime I'm painting in 1-point perspective or drawing 1-point perspective, the horizontals and the verticals, what are they always going to be? Perpendicular to each other or parallel to one another, right? So they're always going to be straights. So anytime I'm going this way, straight line. Anytime I'm coming down this way, straight line, okay? So the grid is like a super important tool, like super important. Like if I was a surfer, like super important, dude. So I can draw a grid, right? If I want to sketch from life and learn how to eyeball the grid, because then it helps me to like lay out my perspective scenes. And then I have like all these lines, but they're just gonna be like following my grid without me needing to draw every single thing to a vanishing point, okay? So sometimes it's helpful just to like have these really, really faint lines in the back of your scene. Question, Jazz?
It's just that when the object is like turning, then that's when the slide goes.
Yeah, if I have like a single box floating here in space, right? And it's turned. It's all of a sudden going to be in 2 point. So it's not going to be in 1 point. So can I have a 2 point and 1 point object? Yes. Can I have a 2 point perspective object in a 1 point scene? Yes. Because it's on the same horizon line, it just has a different set of rules. Okay? Good question. All right, so here's a 2 point perspective. What's different with a 2 point perspective? 2 points converging in space. And you're going to notice that when they converge, it creates this grid that goes both ways, like almost like a crazy hashtag, right? So I first want to start out with my eye level, which is right here. Usually I will draw it in a different color, not in the red, okay? I will have one vanishing point that's right here. How can I determine it? I'm looking at the edge of these objects and just drawing my vanishing point, boop, right here, vanishing point right here, okay? And then I'm going to go to this building and I'm going to say, where does the other vanishing point go? It's going to go way off my page. And I'm just going to draw like a whole bunch of lines. They don't have to be in any specific order. As long as they're kind of like equally spaced, I don't even need to measure them, okay? And I will find the closest line to what I'm drawing and use that as a way to kind of guide my lines. So that way I don't have to pull out a ruler every single time I'm making a mark. Does that make sense? Okay. Here's another one. This one's an interior of a Japanese house, right? And you can see this one's a little bit more clear, right? Because the edge is right in front of you. 2 vanishing points. There's my grid. And I'm just using that to draw everything in, okay? Here's one that has no perspective built into it at all, but it's actually foliage, right? But I'm using my perspective to show the viewer and to help me draw the tree trunk in perspective, right? The ape, anyone know what this is from? Tarzan, correct. This is actually in Tarzan, in the book, right? And all these little studies that kind of happen into it, okay? So there's a whole theme that we can kind of roll into. What I want to do is go over some samples before I actually go over the assignment because it is being recorded. So let me show you some perspective samples. So for this weekend and next week, what I want you to do, and if I don't have the portal already up, it should have like a photo submission portal. I will open it up just so I can kind of look at your submissions. Where is this? Can anyone tell me? This is right here, right outside the hall, okay? I normally have students kind of work during class, but because I knew this lesson was going to take all day long, I'm going to actually have you just bring your photos to class, and we're going to be working on your homework in class instead of doing 2 simultaneous assignments because you have how many more weeks left of school? 1. So we're kind of tight. So you're going to see some pictures of IVC. You're going to see students kind of working on some buildings. And you're going to see how the grids, right, even in the tiles, can be used as like helpful tools to break down things like spaces between lockers. How did they do these lockers? Little crisscross, find the center line, break it down equidistantly, right? How do they find these doors? You find the crisscross of the big room, find the middle of it, right? Figure out how far the doors are going to be, okay? All these things are based on those same ideas between finding the center and finding perspective. Is this a 1 point or a 2 point perspective drawing? 1 point. Why? All the lines are converging into 1 point in space, okay? Here's a 2 point. Which building is that? Can anyone tell me? Right next to us, right? And if you look at it, you can see I'm just drawing through the horizon lines, vanishing points. This is all I want to see. And that you start breaking down these windows using boop, 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 centers all the way through. Okay, Jasmine? This angle right here, I just had him eyeball it. Yeah, I'm not going to be too particular. Don't worry. If this is like advanced perspective, I'd have you measure out everything, and I would be bored and want to shoot myself in the head. So let's not do that. Let's keep it drawing. This one's facing the other direction, down that way, where this door was like sticking out. Actually, no, this is next to the elevator. It's right here. And this is the stairway over there. Okay. This is another interior space. This is somebody's kitchen. Really well done. But look underneath it. right, is a vellum sheet. And what that vellum sheet have? The grid, okay? And this is what I want to show you. I want to show you the grid because this is how your homework should look like. It should be 2 sheets of paper taped together. One is going to have all your vanishing points underneath it. The other one is going to be just your clean line work of your finished drawing, okay? So for next week on Tuesday when I see you guys, I don't need to see this second sheet. All we're going to be working on is what's happening underneath. Then you put the second sheet on when you finish up your drawing, okay? You can bring them both in, but we're going to be working at laying it out, okay? Here's another one of Bistic. This one's okay. This one's a cool one of an interior of a house. You guys can do IVC if you want to take a picture of IVC. You can do an interior if you want to do an interior of your home. It is totally up to you. But the final drawing should be on vellum or tracing paper, and it should be the measurements that we're going to be talking about. So you could see your drawing underneath, you can see the line work underneath through your drawing, right? Because you want to be able to see where those vanishing points are. Okay, another one. This one's really well done, very clear, right? Here's another one that used a little bit of value. Don't put any values in these drawings. I just want to see lines, okay? I'm giving you all different variants of like capability, obviously. This one was really well done, really beautiful drawing of an image from a church from their childhood, right? This is the original drawing, and then this is the refined drawing, okay? You can see kind of like the difference between the first level and then the detail. And all the perspective was drawn in blue. All right. Somebody did a study beforehand, which I recommend, just like drawing it in a sketchbook, just so you can figure out your perspective, and then doing the final drawing on the final sheet of paper, okay? Don't do anything like this. This is just really lame, okay? I just wanted to point this out. This is great. Perspective is great, but it's very simple. It can be something with a little bit of complexity, okay? All right, let me stop this recording.